I was 14 when my parents decided to send me to Kingston Hall dormitory for girls. It was an old historic building half covered by creeping ivy and sat amongst dense surrounding woods with a long driveway to the main entry. My dormitory was located in the part of the school that looked like it hadn't been touched in decades. The halls were narrow and dimly lit, the floorboards creaking with every step, but it had a big library, and I loved reading books. It always felt cold there, even on a warm day, like the walls were made of ice. It wasn't just the chill, it was the way the building seemed to watch you, the way shadows clung to the corners. It always felt a bit creepy. My roommate was Jess. She had been at the dorm for 2 years. She was a nice girl, very polite and caring. We had quite a lot in common and got on well. We would often talk about different things, but one night she said, "They don't tell you everything here about Kingston Hall. This place has secrets." I laughed it off. "What kind of secrets?" I asked. Jess paused and said, "You'll see. Just be prepared and don't talk about anything to the others." I didn't know exactly what she meant. The other girls seemed fine, a little distant maybe, but harmless. There was Emma, who barely spoke but always seemed nervous and bit her nails a lot. Then there was Judy, who laughed too much, and Wendy, who just tried too hard to act normal. Everything had been fine for the first few months until strange things started happening. One night, I heard whispers. They were very soft at first, barely audible like they were coming from the walls. I lay perfectly still, straining to listen, but I couldn't make out any words. I sat up in bed, glancing over at Jess, but she was fast asleep. Then I saw movement in the corner of the room. A black shadow appeared that was darker than the darkness around it. It was motionless, like it was there watching me. I got a fright and my heart started pounding. Then, just as quickly as it appeared, the shadow was gone. Regardless, I hardly slept that night. I told my mother about it the next day. She didn't believe me. "It's just nerves, honey," my mum said over the phone. "You're in a new place. Your mind's playing tricks on you." But I knew it wasn't. I knew something wasn't right. I started to believe that what Jess had told me could be true. From then on, things got worse. The whispers grew louder and more persistent, and it didn't matter what time of day or night it was, or what I was doing. They were everywhere, echoing down the hallways, coming from inside the walls and beneath the floors. Sometimes I'd hear my name being whispered, soft and raspy, like someone was standing right next to me and whispering in my ear. And then there were the footsteps. I'd hear them every night after lights out, slow and deliberate, pacing outside my door. The first few times, I thought it was one of the girls sneaking around. But when I opened the door, the hallway was always empty. The footsteps would stop the second I looked, but I could feel a cold crawling sensation like someone was always watching me. Jess felt it too. "It's her," she whispered, "the girl who disappeared." I sat there stunned. "What girl? What are you talking about?" I asked. Jess shuddered. "There's a story. There was a girl who used to live in this dorm before I came here. She vanished one day and nobody ever saw her again. Some say she ran away, others that she was kidnapped or even murdered. Her parents were so devastated. Some believe that her ghost is still here." I didn't want to believe her, but the things I saw and felt so far meant I couldn't ignore it. The rocking started next. I would wake up and my bed would sway, gently at first, like someone was pushing it from side to side. I'd lie perfectly still, terrified, waiting for it to stop. Sometimes it stopped, but sometimes it would get worse, rocking more violently like something was trying to throw me out. Sometimes I'd grab the rails on the headrest, holding on for dear life, but usually I just jumped out of bed and then it stopped. If that wasn't enough, my things started to move from their place or disappear altogether. First, a hairbrush, then a notebook, and even my phone went missing once. I'd tear apart my room looking for them only to find them weeks later in the strangest places, like under my bed, behind the wardrobe, and even inside one of my shoes. Jess wasn't surprised. She told me it happened to her before and said, "She's just playing mind games to confuse you." I didn't want to believe her, but what other explanation was there? A few weeks went by and things seemed to return to normal until one night when I woke up from my sleep. The room felt cold and stifling, the air thick with that sense of being watched. I lay there staring up at the ceiling, and then I heard it, a soft humming. It was faint, but unmistakable, like a lullaby. I turned my head toward the sound, and that's when I saw her. A ghostly-looking girl in a long white dress was standing there with arms by her side in the corner of the room. Her head was tilted downward. Her hair was long, dark, and tangled, hanging over her face. She was swaying, rocking slowly back and forth. I wanted to scream, but my throat closed up. Jess was fast asleep opposite, but I couldn't reach her. My body felt like lead, frozen in place by fear as I stared at the ghostly girl. Then she slowly lifted her head, just enough for me to see her empty eyes, hollow and black as a void. I bolted out of bed and ran down the hallway, my heart palpitating in my chest. I didn't stop until I reached the common room where I collapsed onto the couch gasping for air. Jess found me there in the morning, still shaking and crying. "We have to leave," I whispered in a hoarse voice. "We can't stay here." Jess nodded. "I know," she said, "but where will we go?" We were stuck in a nightmare situation. The final straw came a week later. I was reading a book in bed when I felt it, like cold fingers wrapping around my ankles. I wanted to kick my legs to get them off me, but couldn't move. And then they tightened and started to pull me toward the edge of the bed. I screamed and thrashed against the invisible force. Then Jess rushed out of bed to help me, her face pale, her eyes wide with fear, and said, "It's her. She is following you." That was it. I was done. I called my father the next morning and told him everything. I didn't care if he thought I was crazy, or even if I was put into a mental institution. I begged and pleaded with him to get me out of there, which happened only a few days later. I was moved to another boarding school, far from Kingston Hall. My mother was furious with me, telling me it was all my imagination, but she knew that's what I wanted. I had my own room and made new friends that seemed more normal than at Kingston Hall. Finally, I felt safe from all the creepy torment, and for 5 full months, I was at peace. I focused on my studies, read a lot of books, and sometimes I wondered how Jess was doing and if she was still all right. Then one night I woke up, completely paralyzed with eyes wide open. I thought I must be dreaming because I heard the whispers again. This time I was alone in my room. I was without Jess and felt even more vulnerable. To my horror, the whispers and humming returned with a vengeance. I wanted to jump out of bed, but I couldn't move. Then I felt those fingers slowly wrapping around my ankles and gripped them tight. I felt myself being pulled towards the end of the bed, and this time I was pulled so hard I flew right off the bed and onto the wooden floor. I must have passed out, and when I woke up I was sitting on the floor in a confused state. I felt a presence in the corner of the room again, and it made me tremble as I slowly moved my eyes towards that direction. That's when I saw a black shadow slowly forming into a ghostly girl again. In the morning light there she was again, just like I remembered her before, in her long white dress, standing and swaying, with her arms by her sides. Her long dark hair hung in front of her face. Then she lifted her head, looking straight at me with her big, hollow eyes. I almost blacked out from the fear, but I knew I had to stay strong this time. She started to shuffle slowly towards me. I leaned backward as she got closer and closer, and when she was close enough, she paused and said in a faint voice, "I am lost. I want to go home. Please help me to go back." Suddenly, I remembered reading about spirits in a book a few months back. It said that some souls can become earthbound after the physical body dies and can't move on. The book says if you encounter such spirits, tell them to go to the light. So with my task at hand, and with the little strength I had left in me, I said, "Find the light and go toward it." I kept repeating, "Go to the light, go to the light." She stood there for a moment with her head down, like she was thinking. Then a dim glow appeared and began to get bigger and brighter until it filled the room with the most beautiful, warm, loving light that I ever saw. Then she turned around and faced away from me, lifted her arms upwards, and began to rise up slowly towards the ceiling and vanished. I never saw her again. I figured that she chose me as her earthly savior, to release her from this realm, and that's why she followed me. I hope she is at peace now, wherever she may be.